going to cause obviously problems among law enforcement agencies and may compromise the ability of New Jersey officials to develop a healthy relationship with the communities that they serve. So in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, we did an aggressive outreach to the Muslim community, and not just to the Muslim community, to the Sikh community, because the Sikh community was the target through total ignorance of vigilante activity. Also to Jewish synagogues, some of which were vandalized after 9/11, for reasons that have never been clear to me. But I spent a lot of the last 4 months of my term as Attorney General meeting with various community groups and trying to foster the sense of trust between law enforcement and the communities. And it wasn't exactly interfaith dialogue. The audiences weren't diverse the way this one is, and it tended to be of one denomination or one kind of religious belief or another. But really what it underscored for me was really the failure of law enforcement prior to 9/11 to realize that the state was as diverse as it is, and the region is as diverse as it is, and we were remiss, quite frankly, in not fostering that kind of dialogue earlier. It culminated with an interfaith dialogue that we had at Rutgers in Newark after 9/11, and we called all the faiths together to talk about the need for this kind of bridge building, so that the Huntington thesis of Clash of Civilizations didn't come true. And it was a very productive meeting. I frankly don't know how much has been built on since I left office, but that's the kind of thing that this center is designed to foment and foster, and I think it's essential to prevent the Clash of Civilizations from occurring. After I left office, so I had the experience of living through the day and being involved in the reaction to it, in the Victim Witness Center, in the assistance to the FBI and other law enforcement after 9/11. And then I had the privilege, after I left office, of being able to actually study it, because I can recall on the morning of 9/12, when I finally got home, it was about 3 or 4 in the morning, and went out on our deck, and our deck faces east. You can't see New York from where I live, but on that particular night you could see the smoke, and the smoke was coming up from the Trade Center ruins, and Orion was rising, the constellation was rising, sort of in proximity to it at that hour in the morning, and you know, astronomy is one of my hobbies. It gives me great peace to get out the telescope and look at the Orion Nebula and things like that, and sort of gives you a sense of the wonder that I think is the spark of all the religions in the world. And I remember sitting out there that night and just wondering how the hell this happened, you know, and the question, it's almost like the question of Nazism, how the hell it happened. I don't think I'll ever be satisfied with an explanation of it. But that question really sort of has haunted me, and that's the main reason that I agreed to take on the assignment to the 9/11 Commission. Governor Kane called and asked me if I was willing to do it, was to help answer that question. And Elizabeth's presentation covered a lot of the ground that I was assigned to cover, which was how do you explain the fact that our whole national security framework was a consequence and reaction to Pearl Harbor. So we had built up over 50, 60 years an infrastructure whose sole purpose was to prevent a surprise attack. And what happened on 9/11 was a surprise attack. So how is it that we were configured in a way that was ineffective? And again, so many things come back to communication, but if I were going to identify one failing that permeates the government's response to the rise of Al-Qaeda, it's the failure to communicate, both within agencies and among cultures. The book that I wrote, The Ground Truth, sort of lays out in detail, probably painful detail, painstaking detail, the various ways in which our government agencies just didn't communicate with each other. And so that the hijackers, the attackers were able, I think unknowingly, but to basically travel down through in the fault lines that lay between the agencies where the FBI and CIA were not sharing information, where something as simple as the no-fly list, the FAA had a no-fly list with 12 names on it. The State Department had a similar list with 60,000 names on it. The two agencies didn't even know the other was maintaining such a list until the 9/11 Commission hearings were held. So it was in some ways, a very sobering task to sort of document these missed dots, but it also reinforced the notion that the only way that we're going to adequately be prepared for a similar kind of attack in the future is to find a way to foster communication, both within agencies where human nature takes over and knowledge is power, and if I know something you don't, I have power, and it really is that simple at some level, and so information doesn't get shared. Find ways to incentivize government to work better, but also to realize the outreach that has to occur to the communities that government is supposed to serve. And without that kind of outreach, alienation happens, all the estrangement that has been talked about here this morning happens, the sense of otherness happens, and you can drift into a situation of a clash of civilizations without ever having intended it. It can be simply a matter of cultural drift. In the years since 9/11, as I've thought about this and in sort of preparing for today, I actually reread The Clash of Civilizations, which I hadn't really picked up in 10 years. Very interesting, again, interesting book. And one of the quotes in the book is by Huntington says, I can't love myself without hating you. He's quoting something with fiction. And it raises the question, is that really true? I mean, it may be a drift, something that cultures can drift toward, but is that really inevitable, and is it true? And when you think about the suffering inflicted on 9/11, you do have to wonder. I mean, as many wondered after 9/11, how could people who espouse Islamic culture, the culture that gave the world the elegance of algebra and higher mathematics, the majesty of the Alhambra and mosaic art, soaring astronomy, mystic poetry, how could people who claim to embody that tradition perpetrate in its name an act of mass slaughter and desire annihilation in its name? But to answer that question, you really have to concede at the outset that the same question hangs over all cultures and all history. One way of looking at history, and this is a very pessimistic way, sees it as a sequence of atrocities, not limited by time or space, religion or culture, extending beyond recorded history and unlikely to end. For example, how could my Roman Catholic tradition, the tradition in which I was raised, which gave the world the grand vision in the Sistine Chapel and the magnificence of the Gothic Cathedral, also have given the world the brutal intolerance of the Inquisition, the burning of heretics, persecution of the Jews, the Crusades? How could German culture, the culture of Mozart and Beethoven, the culture of Goethe, have produced Auschwitz and Buchenwald? How could Japanese culture, with its majestic gardens of Kyoto and its cultivation of inner serenity and civility, have produced mass beheadings of the Chinese at Nanking? How could Anglo-American culture, the culture of Eliot and Shakespeare, the culture of the American Declaration of Independence, have countenanced slavery and segregation and the near genocide of the American Indian? Every major culture in human history has produced stirring self-affirmations. That's what makes civilizations great. The Alhambra, the Sistine Chapel, the music of Mozart, the gardens of Kyoto, the Declaration of Independence. But tragically, every culture seems also to have had the need to define it is, in part, by renouncing, and in some ways obliterating, what it is not, often in the name of its highest principles. The Inquisition, the Holocaust, Nanking, slavery, Cambodia, Kosovo, Rwanda, and bombing the World Trade Center. Why is this? I believe that cultures in the past have fallen prey to the same dilemmas of logic versus experience that challenge our legal system, and for that matter, every intellectual pursuit. An adherence to the narrow consistency of the existing paradigm, even in the face of incompatible elements, for fear that the inclusion of those elements may imperil the entire system. That fear is the power of fundamentalism, and it is not in the abstract or legitimate. It is instead a dilemma of the human mind, a reaction akin to the effort in the Middle Ages to accommodate new data about how the planets move to an Earth-centered paradigm. We know now that the ultimate reaction was to forego it, was to forge a new synthesis to recognize that our world's center is our sun. At the time, however, people clung to the old paradigm, even when its logic was clearly no longer the best description of the world, and they lashed out at those who insisted otherwise. That lashing out is the handprint of fundamentalism upon human history. It is why medieval astronomers were burned alive for believing that there were other suns and other solar systems. It's why Galileo was forced to recant. We define in some measure by excluding. We say who we are, at least in part, by saying who we are not. When we delude ourselves that our definitions are universally true or morally superior, it's a short step, even a logical step, to the impulse to oppress or destroy everything and everyone that lies outside those definitions. So Africans are deemed subhuman so that their owners can believe that all men are created equal and still keep their property. Chinese are beheaded as an exercise in the art of samurai swordsmanship. Jewish skulls are crushed as a scientific test of mammalian pain thresholds. Jetliners loaded with people and fuel are flown into crowded skyscrapers in the name of God, with no thought of human suffering and the endless ripples of family heartbreak that follow.